I never thought sXXing my boyfriend in the rare books section of our university library would end with us getting caught by staff, reported to the dean, and becoming campus legends for all the wrong reasons, but here we are. I'm a 22-year-old literature major, and this is the story of how one study break turned into academic probation, social media infamy, and a hard lesson about why libraries have strict conduct policies that aren't just suggestions. Sam and I had been dating for 4 months when this happened, having met in a contemporary American literature seminar where we were the only 2 students who actually enjoyed the postmodern novels everyone else complained about. Our relationship started with coffee shop debates about David Foster Wallace and Thomas Pynchon, progressed to long walks discussing our favorite books, and eventually evolved into the kind of intense early relationship romance where everything feels heightened and significant. We were both English majors, both planning to apply for graduate programs, both spending most of our waking hours either in class or in the library working on papers and preparing for exams. That particular Wednesday evening in mid-October, we'd been in the main library for about 4 hours straight, camped out at adjacent study carrels on the 3rd floor working through reading lists for our upcoming midterms. I was preparing for a Victorian literature exam and Sam was working on a modernist poetry seminar, and we'd fallen into a comfortable rhythm of reading and note-taking with occasional whispered comments to each other when we found something interesting or needed a brain break. By 9 p.m. my eyes were starting to cross from reading too much Dickens, and I desperately needed to move around and clear my head. I suggested to Sam that we take a walk through the library's special collections section, which housed rare books and manuscripts and was located in a more isolated wing of the building. I'd been there a few times for research projects and knew it was beautiful and atmospheric, with dark wood shelving and dim lighting and that specific old book smell that literature students find intoxicating. Sam agreed immediately, also needing a break from his dense poetry analysis, and we left our books spread across our carrels to save our spots and headed toward the special collections wing. The rare books section was accessed through a separate entrance that required swiping your student ID, and when we entered it was completely empty and quiet, clearly not a popular study spot at 9 p.m. on a weeknight. The main lights were off, but there were small reading lamps scattered throughout that created pools of warm light among the shadows, and the floor-to-ceiling wooden shelves created these narrow corridors between sections that felt incredibly private and isolated despite being in a public building. We wandered through slowly, both of us automatically lowering our voices to whispers even though there was nobody around to disturb, occasionally pulling books off shelves to examine beautiful old editions or pointing out interesting titles to each other. We'd made our way to the back corner of the section, the furthest point from the entrance, when Sam pulled me close and kissed me in that spontaneous way that had characterized our early relationship. I kissed him back enthusiastically, both of us caught up in the moment and the romance of being surrounded by all these books in this atmospheric space. The kissing became more intense and more physical, Sam pressing me back against one of the shelves while his hands moved over my body and mine explored his. We were both getting increasingly aroused, and the combination of being alone in this beautiful space and the thrill of being somewhere we probably shouldn't be doing this created an intensity that overrode my normal caution. Sam whispered that we should do it right here, right now in the stacks, that nobody ever came to this section at night and we'd hear if anyone entered through the ID-controlled door. Every rational part of my brain knew this was a terrible idea. We were in a university library. There were probably security cameras. Staff could show up at any moment. Other students might need access to materials, but the impulsive emotional part of my brain that was aroused and excited won out over reason. I said yes, and we moved deeper into the corner, finding a spot between 2 tall shelves where we'd be less visible from the main aisles, and we started sXXing standing up against the bookshelf with our clothes only partially removed. We'd been there for maybe 10 or 15 minutes, both of us completely absorbed in each other and the physical sensations, when I heard a sound that made my blood run cold, the distinctive beep of the security door being opened followed by footsteps and voices. We froze, still entangled, both realizing simultaneously that someone was entering the section and we were about to be discovered. We frantically tried to separate and fix our clothes, but there wasn't enough time, and within seconds a library employee appeared at the end of our aisle with a book cart, clearly doing routine reshelving. The employee was a middle-aged woman who I'd seen at the circulation desk before, and her face went through this progression of confusion to shock to professional disapproval as she processed what she was seeing. She asked sharply what we thought we were doing, and I stammered something completely incoherent while Sam tried to apologize, but there was obviously no explanation that would make this okay. Then I heard more voices and laughter, and realized with horror that a group of students had followed the employee into the section, probably coming to use materials for their own studying, and they'd seen everything too. The library employee told us firmly to leave immediately and that she'd be reporting this incident to library administration. The students who'd witnessed our humiliation were clearly trying not to laugh out loud but failing, already pulling out their phones to text their friends about what they'd just seen. Sam and I gathered what little dignity we had left and walked out of the special collections section and then out of the library entirely, not even going back to collect our study materials from the third floor, just wanting to escape as quickly as possible. We sat outside on a bench in the cold October night, both too mortified to speak, until finally Sam said he was really sorry for suggesting we do that and he felt terrible about getting caught. I was too upset to really engage with his apology in the moment, just said I needed to go back to my dorm and think, and we separated without making any plans to meet up or talk further. I spent that night lying awake replaying the scene and worrying about what consequences we'd face beyond just the immediate embarrassment. The consequences came fast. Thursday morning I woke up to texts from multiple friends asking if I was the girl who got caught hooking up in the rare books section, because apparently the story was already spreading through campus social networks. One of the students who'd witnessed it had posted about it in a group chat, and from there it had spread to multiple other chats and social media platforms. And while my name wasn't explicitly included in most versions, people who knew me were putting together that it was probably me based on timing and descriptions. By lunchtime I was getting knowing looks from people in my classes and seeing screenshots of messages about the incident being forwarded around. Friday afternoon I received an email from the Dean of Students' office asking me to schedule a meeting to discuss a conduct violation that had been reported by library staff. Sam got the same email. We met briefly before our respective appointments and agreed to just be honest and apologetic and hope for leniency since this was a first offense for both of us. My meeting was incredibly uncomfortable. The dean's assistant explained that sXXing activity in university buildings was prohibited, that we'd violated the student code of conduct and library policies, and that because this occurred in a special collections area where irreplaceable materials were housed, we'd created risk of damage to university property. They gave me academic probation for the remainder of the semester and banned me from the library except during staffed hours when I needed materials for coursework. The social consequences lasted much longer than the official ones. For the rest of that semester I was known as Library Girl to people who didn't even know my actual name, and the story got retold and embellished with details that weren't accurate but made it sound even more scandalous. Friends thought it was hilarious and would bring it up at parties. Guys I'd never met would make inappropriate comments when they saw me on campus, and professors who'd heard the story through the faculty gossip network seemed to view me with less respect even though it had nothing to do with my academic work. I stopped going to social events and became much more isolated, embarrassed every time I had to walk through campus worrying that people were whispering about me. Sam and I tried to keep dating, but the incident had created too much strain. We fought about whose idea it had been originally, about whether he was taking it seriously enough when he'd joke about it to friends, about how this affected me differently than him because of gendered double standards around sexual behavior. After about 6 weeks of increasingly tense interactions, we mutually agreed to break up, both acknowledging that we couldn't separate our relationship from the library incident anymore and needed a clean break. By the time the semester ended, the story had mostly died down, replaced by newer campus gossip, but I'd permanently lost my reputation as a serious student and had to work twice as hard the following semester to rebuild credibility with professors and peers. The library eventually lifted my access restrictions, but I never went back to the special collections section. Couldn't handle the memories and associations with that space. I changed my approach to studying, my social life, my willingness to be spontaneous or take risks, all because of one decision that seemed exciting in the moment but created consequences that lasted months. Now, a year later, I can look back with less acute embarrassment and more perspective on what I learned. The rare books section taught me that universities take their codes of conduct seriously and violations have real academic consequences, that social media makes every embarrassing moment potentially viral within your community, and that recovering your reputation after a very public mistake is much harder than protecting it in the first place. I learned to think through consequences before acting on impulse, to recognize when excitement is overriding good judgment, and to understand that some moments of pleasure cost far more than they're worth. Those were expensive lessons, paid for with embarrassment and academic probation and a breakup, but they're lessons I'll carry forward into every decision I make about where and when and how to be intimate with future partners.